like to introduce my good friend Barb Handysides, who I've known for years, and we reconnected when she moved back to the island. So we've been doing lunches together quite frequently, and yeah, I'd love to have her back, and I'm excited to hear her story.
So thank you, Shirley. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about how I got to Royal Oak. So I'm a transplant. I was born in London, Ontario. My dad worked for the CN Railroad back there, and in 1955, they had the largest layoff for CN Rail in the history. So thousands of men got laid off in 1955. So my dad had an older brother living here on Vancouver Island in Victoria, and he wrote him and said, you know, like, what's the chances of getting a job out there? I got 3 kids and a wife to feed, you know, that kind of thing. And his brother owned a construction company called Handysides and Blake. He was a partner with Blake. And my dad had been trained as a cabinet maker. He didn't even finish school. He went right into apprenticeship and he became a cabinet maker. And that's what he did for the CN railroads. He installed cabinets and stuff on the trains. So his brother said, oh yeah, you come on out and work for me. So with that, he sold everything he owned, including our old Anglia, and went to his cousin in St. Thomas, who owned a Chevy dealership, and brought a brand new 1955 Chevy pickup, a brand new 1955 Chevy car, and a 2-room trailer to bring us across Canada and the US. So we left Ontario in March of 1955, and it took over 2 weeks to get here because we hit storms everywhere. And so we were held up for days on end in different American towns. And just after they came across the American border, they had the back of the pickup loaded with treasures, you know, like grandma's furniture and stuff, my baby buggy and all my dolls. And as they were going through a turnaround, they lost half the load, and there was no stopping. So somebody got some lovely treasures. So anyways, it did take us quite a while to get here because of all the storms. My mom did not drive, so my dad had a friend of his drive the truck, pulling the trailer, and I quite often would sit with that man to keep him company because I was mad at my parents for moving me. Like, how dare you? I was supposed to be in an ice-capade, and I was really pissed because I didn't get to do it. So I was not very fond of them at that particular time. When we got here to Victoria, my dad parked the trailer in my uncle's driveway on Darwin Avenue, and we lived in their driveway for about 2 weeks. Then we went to Colwood Corners, where we lived in Ernie Kay's trailer park and motel, which is now the site of Saunders Subaru. So we lived in Colwood for about a year, and in that time my dad bought a lot on Glanford Avenue, which he intended to build a home on. And so after work every night, he would be at the lot building, and quite often I would go and help my dad. So when we moved to Glanford, we were the newest house on Glanford Avenue, the last house on Glanford Avenue on the right-hand side as you're going down the hill. And it was all open fields. There was a farm across the road. There was a big pasture just down to the south of us. Plus all up the hills was all farms. Palfrey's had a farm up there, and Robinson's, and a few other people. So it was still quite rural. You felt like you were in the country. Now you can't move for houses. Like that was a 3/4 of an acre lot that my dad bought. So many years later, my dad and neighbors on either side decided to go together and cut their 3/4 acre lots down, and there's now a cul-de-sac in there with like 12 houses. Like, it's just unreal. So yeah, that was a brand new 3-bedroom, state-of-the-art home with a basement and a garage inside. It was pretty awesome. And my parents lived in that house until 2004 when they both passed away. On the right across the road from us was a family named Hall, and they had a chinchilla farm on their property. So one of the cement buildings on their property housed chinchillas, and next to Hall's was Tubman's house, which is now the Bird of Paradise pub. And I think Dougal's house has been torn down, but there's like 6 houses where Man Avenue was not a through road. It stopped just at the end of Hartnett's property, and Mons were on the opposite side of the street, and there was a trail down the side of Hartnett's property that would go through to the back end of Royal Oak School. So we'd go up Glanford, down Man Avenue, pick up Penny, who's here today, and then go down the trail into school, and we would come home that way as well. I think one of the first things, excuse me, that I remember is discovering Elk Lake. So that was something pretty special to us to go to Elk Lake, and we used to always go to the end where the Black Swan was, if anybody remembers the Black Swan. They had the best chips. So we used to take picnic dinners there after work sometimes. And another thing I can remember, we used to, if anybody else did this, just put your hand up. Ever ride your bike without hanging on to the handlebars? So, I practiced like crazy to do that, and I could ride my bike from Glanford, where our house was, all the way to the Royal Oak Shopping Centre, which the roads were quite different then because Glanford came right down to Douglas Street. And if you remember where the old People's Hospital is at the end of Glanford, so that was the last building before you hit they called it the highway, but it was then still called Douglas Street. So there was a part of an old road, and I'm not sure what that road was, on the opposite side where Slater's and Schwam's had. It was a road that had been there before, and they took it all out except for that one section right in front of Slater's house. And then after you passed Schwam's, you were entering the old Royal Oak Shopping Centre. I also used to ride my bike without anybody going with me. You could never do this with kids nowadays. From Glanford all the way to Beaver Lake, and would go through the back end of Pipeline. There was a trail that you could get all the way through to the lake on. I think lots of us remember that trail. I attended Girl Guides in the original Royal Oak Schoolhouse, and then we went to Mrs. Bradley's, and Carol and Margaret were both saying that they thought there was another place we went to, but I only remember Bradley's and the schoolhouse. I also had piano lessons from a lady on Man Avenue named Mrs. Hicks, and she actually taught quite a few kids in the neighborhood, so I don't know. Penny, did you ever have lessons from her? Unfortunately, yeah. And every open field was a ball diamond to us, and there was lots of open fields around. So just behind where the old people's home was, there was a big open field, which is now the Quadra Street exit. We used to play ball there. We used to play ball in the back of our yard. We used to play ball in the back of Dougal's yard. We used to go down to the school and play ball. Like, we were baseball fanatics. I also used to ride at the Golden Rule Riding Academy on East Saanich Road, and that was thanks to Trudy, a man. She took me out there and got me hooked. And as a child, I did the usual things like babysitting, picking raspberries at Heels, picking strawberries at Kello's. And I don't know if anybody remembers the old Royal Oak Cafe, the original one that was just a long, thin little cafe right by the trail that went past Schwam's. All it had was a counter and stools up to the counter, no tables or anything. It was just a little short order place, hamburger and milkshakes. I was 14 and I lied and said I was 16 and got a job as a short order cook and waitress. So I did that one summer. Heels is where Centennial Pool is now. That used to be Heels. They had a big raspberry farm there. Penny and I both used to go and pick raspberries. Yeah, what did I say? Oh, that's all right. It's memory. My mom actually worked in that hospital at the end of Glanford. And it was just the original building that was there then. And Penny's mom worked there as well. And a lot of those people didn't have any family around. And so we were encouraged to go and visit patients. So we would quite often, thank you for doing this, go and visit people that had no family because they came from other places. And I essentially were just put into that hospital whether they liked it or not. So I started Royal Oak Elementary in grade 3. We moved into that home, I believe, the end of April or the beginning of May. And so I only had a couple of months, but Mrs. Reed was our teacher then. Lovely lady, but a little bit overpowering to a new kid. And she yelled at Danny Potter, and it scared the heck out of me. I stayed in Royal Oak Elementary and went into Royal Oak Senior, started grade 7, and got Mrs. Reed again. By that time, I quite loved her. And she missed us, that's why she came up to the high school. And we were, excuse me, also part of that group that got bused out to Mount Newton when they were building Claremont. So the Mount Newton kids got the school in the morning, we got the school in the afternoon, and I think we caught the bus at like 1 and we'd get home at 6 o'clock at night. It was a lovely year, I'll tell you. Yeah, I stayed at Claremont until Mr. Lott and I had a difference of opinion about my choices for grade 12. And so I went and got a full-time job the next day and said, poo to you. So I was hoping Diana Punt would be here because my next line is going to be, Diana Punt, I am so sorry and I apologize, but I never graduated and I've attended every graduation ceremony that Royal has ever had. Starting in, I think it was 1965, a lot of my friends and I used to go to Western Speedway, you know, hot cars, hot guys, that kind of stuff. So I met my husband there. Rick Gilman introduced us, and I'm still speaking to him. And my husband and I got married here in St. Michael's and All Angels in February of '66. Both of my children were christened here. So getting to places where we lived, when Ken and I were first married, we unfortunately had to live with his parents because we didn't have a place yet, and we were a little bit undecided as to what neighborhood we were going to go to. His parents lived in Gordon Head, and they had a big house, and it was just them in the house, so supposedly lots of room for us. But after 2 months, I said, we have to get a place of our own. So we found a place on Douglas Street. Mr. Peace owned it, and it was right across from the Vanelman driving range, if you remember that, which that's a long time ago. And lo and behold, my next door neighbor was one of my school chums, Shirley Hunt and Morris Hunt. We all lived just right by Fat's Poultry Farm. So that was lots of fun. Very interesting year that we spent there, I can tell you that. After that, so we went through a few expropriations too, because Mr. Peace came to us and said, I'm going to sell the house because they're going to expropriate part of the property to put in the Pat Bay Highway. And our house was like right there where they were going to do it. And he offered to sell us the house. So it was a house and an acre of property for $11,000. And I thought, oh, wow, we could get that. And he said, no, I don't think that's a good deal. Or I think his mom said, no, that's not a good deal. And we ended up moving out to the church rectory at the corner of Spartan, Old West, and Oldfield. You know where that? So we were in the church rectory, which racing and churches do not go together, because we're up very late partying after the races, and they start church very early the next morning. So we didn't stay in that house for that long. We had an opportunity to rent the piece of property, which was that pie shape, which Garsides owned. And so we took them up on their offer and moved down, because it was 9 acres, so it gave us lots of room from the church. And we had all kinds of wonderful things happen there. Our first son was born at the house on Douglas Street. Our second son was born at Garsides. While we were living in Garsides, we found a piece of property on Gilly Avenue, which is over closer to the Hamilton Hospital, or Holland and Hastings, if you know where they meet, just down in that gully. So we bought the piece of property, and then they were expropriating property on Normandy to put in the bypass and everything. So we had an opportunity to buy the Phelps house off of Normandy and have it moved to the property on Gilly. So I took Royal Oak with me. And unfortunately, before we got that house finished, we parted ways. And I ended up living in a basement suite behind my parents on Glanford Avenue. So always staying kind of close to home. When we were in that house on Douglas Street, I worked at Woodward's. I was a cashier in the hardware banks until I got pregnant with my first son. And then Henry didn't really want me to work anyways, so I kind of was a stay-at-home mom. And that's what I enjoyed doing too. But it didn't stay that way after we parted ways. After my husband and I separated, I ended up working quite a few jobs. One of them was at the Royal Oak Drug Store, if anybody remembers the original Royal Oak Drug Store. It was owned by Joe Despot at the time. He had bought it from Mr. Crosby, and Joe Despot was Penny's first husband. And I keep referring to Penny. She's sitting in the back of the room. She's been my best friend for 60 years. Well, at least I didn't throw something at you. So after that, I went back to Woodward's full-time in 72, and I stayed with them for 22 years. So, and then there's lots of other things I did too, but that's basically my history here in Royal Oak. And I don't know if I jogged anybody's memories about some of those places, or lack of roads, or whatever. Any questions?
You mentioned going to guides at a couple of locations, including Mrs. Bradley's. Was the Women's Institute Hall not one of the places?
It may have been, but I didn't ever go there, no.
I know I went to Brownie's in the Women's Institute Hall for a couple of years, I guess. No?
Yeah, I would think I was out of Brownies by the time I came to Royal Oak. But the old Royal Oak School, which is the first place I think that we went to guides in, many years later, my oldest son went to Cub Scouts there. So kind of a full circle there. We did used to go square dancing in the Women's Institute after school. There was one or 2 days a week that they did square dancing for kids, and I can remember doing that instead of going home, going square dancing. Yeah, well, we had lots of fun in that little house. There's lots of stories I could tell that some of them aren't appropriate. Can you remember the time that the race car was in the ditch?
Yeah.
It was one night after racing, we were towing the race car back, and everybody partied after the races. That was their release from all the excitement and tension and adrenaline running. And we'd been to, I think, Mortels or something. And when we came to cut into the driveway, because it was like straight in, he turned too soon and ended up with the trailer and race car in the gully, which they were about 6 feet deep then, right? So here we are straddling this thing. I'm afraid the pickup's going to go as well. And he's saying, just inch over. And he started pulling me so we could get out the car door on the opposite side. So in case it did slide, it went without us, but it was all right, it stayed. But the next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, there's on the door, and the police are there saying, did you guys have a bit of an accident? And I said, oh, just a minute, I'll get the man you want to talk to. And he goes, oh no, he said, I just missed the driveway. But that's where the race car sat for the night. Thank God it only happened once, but yeah. But there's been lots of changes. Even now, like I've come back here again, I'm living in Royal Oak again, which I'm very grateful for. But there's so many changes even now. I drive around to places that we used to go to when we were kids, and to friends' houses just to see if their houses are still there. And some of them are and some of them aren't. But yeah, it's nice to come here because this never changes.
What year did you start grade 3?
1956.
Oh, you're young.
I was just going to say, if you're trying to figure out how old I am, I'm 69.
No, I wasn't. I was just trying to get the time for it.
Yeah. We arrived here in 55 and started school here in 56 in Royal Oak. Yes, Ina?
Did you know the Tubmans very well, Mr. Tubman?
My mom knew them better than I did. We would go, like my mom would send us over with stuff for them, or Mrs. Tubman had something for us and she'd say go over and get it. But their children were older than us. I don't know if they were on PTA or something together, because my mom got involved in everything just like Penny's mom did. They were on the PTA, and if you were in sports, they were there at every sports function that you went to, and I was into sports heavy. I played everything.
Any other families around there that you have memories of?
Well, Penny's always been in my life, so like the Frenches I remember. Sampson's was another one, Dougal's, Dudney's, Kelly's. Oh yeah, the Fullers. They bought Hicks's place. I also used to take art lessons from a lady. Was it Hobbs?
Yeah, across from Wilkinson.
Right on the corner? Yeah. I actually did a summer camp with her, and I was 11 years old. And that's kind of what spurred me into doing art. And now I teach art. So, yeah. And actually, does anybody remember Mr. Chow? From he was the art teacher. And
The same one that taught Beaver Lake Elementary?
I think so, yes. So I ran into him in Broadmead Shopping Center. And you know how you look at somebody and you think you know them, and then you do the double take? And I realized who it was, and I turned around and I yelled, "Mr. Chow!" And I was like in my 50s when I did this. And he kind of looked around at me, and I started to run up to him with my arms out. And he goes, "Whoa, tell me who you are first." And I said, "Barbara Handysides. Ask me what I do for a living." Because I used to get B's and B pluses in art, and he was such an enthusiastic and encouraging teacher. Like everything was game, right? He never would discourage you from trying anything, and if you came to him with an idea, he'd add something to it that you hadn't thought of, and it was like he just made everything so magical. So, and I'm jumping up and down with him in my arms saying, "I teach art."
Yeah.
So.
Was that when Jimmy was at Fairmont? Did you go to Fairmont?
I did for 1 year.
What year was
1964.
Okay, I started there just a year after that.
Yeah. Mr. Lott and I had a difference of opinion. So.
Did you go skating at Quick's Pond?
Oh yeah, we did Panama Flats, Riffits Field. No, not Quicks. We did Riffits and Panama Flats. And I used to catch the bus down to Memorial Arena. Every Friday, I would go to Memorial Arena. What else do we do, Shirley? Oh, riding horses. Oh my God. Different world, wasn't it? Well, heck, when we first moved here from Ontario and we lived in Colwood Corners, and you know where the Wandafuka Rec Center is? That used to be the Department of Defense property, and there was old bunkers down in there that they used for training purposes when young men were entering the forces. And we used to play in those bunkers when we were kids. Like, it was the greatest playground going.
You said you taught art now. Where do you teach it?
Oh, I'm not teaching right now. I'm actually, this is kind of a long, convoluted story. I was in a very serious car accident a year ago, about 18 months ago. And it happened up north, and they didn't have the facilities to help me. And so I moved back to Victoria for medical reasons so that I could get more rehabilitation and stuff. I was teaching off and on, but I find it too hard on me right now because I can only sit for so long, I can only stand for so long. I have a broken back and both shoulders got pulled out of the sockets. My pelvis is twisted. I had a concussion for 2 months. I'm actually lucky to be here, so every day is a blessing. Yeah, I'm amazing. I am. I am too. I am too. And I'm glad you're Al's sister. I had a crush on him when I was in school. Yeah. So thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope I endeared some of your old memories. Oh, this, Enid said if you have pictures or if you have whatever. This book was made at the Royal Oak Elementary School by my brother, who is 7 years younger than me. And this was my Christmas present from him. And it's a cookbook that the grade 5 students made. And some of the recipes are, you know, they're okay. But the names at the bottom, because everybody signed their recipes, it brings back so many memories of all these kids that my brother hung around with. And it tells me that Mrs. Reed then became the grade 5 teacher because she's the teacher in this book. So she went from teaching grade 3s to grade 5s and then up to grade 7s. Yeah. So this is an interesting book with names that you might remember from back then, because I looked at it and went, oh my God, I remember that kid and that kid and that kid, but they were all my brother's buddies.
Where did you find that? You had it
I've had it. My brother gave it to me for Christmas when he was in grade 5. Yeah. I look after my stuff. Oh, and see, we were just talking about that the other day, that we thought there should be a Royal Oak cookbook. And I said, well, you know what? I think I have a Royal Oak cookbook. And I went and looked through all my stuff, and here it was. But and maybe there was another class that did that too. Or maybe the Women's Institute.
It's probably a common thing to have classes do cookbooks
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. I'd never heard of it before, but I think the Women's Institute had a cookbook out, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, yeah. But we should get together and put another one out. Because I like to cook.
You're the chairperson. You're the artist.
I like to eat.